Today's webinar is entitled Unleashing Conscious Creativity in Business. Our presenter is Chris Allen, Creativity Empowerment Coach with Creativity in Biz. Chris is a 1972 RIT graduate with a BFA in photography and over 35 years experience in the sales profession. For the past 21 years, he has been leading Global Accounts Director for a 200-employee user experience consulting firm, Human Factors International. He also has a coaching practice that combines his experience in the business world and his longtime passion for photography. Chris helps clients tap into their creative genius and apply more innovative vision, thought, and action in the workplace. Welcome, Chris, and now let's get started.
Hello, Cindy, and hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be able to present and speak with fellow RIT alumni. As we all have experienced, RIT was a launching point for the journey that we've all taken, which sometimes takes side paths, and certainly was a solid platform, I'm sure, for all of us to have a successful career. So mine has been interesting. I'm going to share with you some of my own personal journey and some of the things that have been important to me in the business sector. Interestingly enough, as you'll see, I started out with the plan of pursuing more creative endeavors. I studied performance music in high school as well as my first 2 years of college, language arts, transferred to RIT and picked up photography and graduated with the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, which at that time, as Tom Wilson told us who were in that program, it's probably not going to be a career for you to be a photography artist. So I did end up pursuing a sales career, which has been very enjoyable, very successful for me, but photography and the creative arts has been a continual passion of mine that I feel has run parallel with the business sector. And one of the things I've constantly seen involved in sales or anything to do with delivering quality business services, consulting or otherwise, is that creativity is critical to the success of the business. And oftentimes we get locked into perspectives that are narrow and that don't allow us to really tap into the creative potential of the individuals within the business, within the team, and I think that's a serious shortfall. So I've been researching, and I'm going to share with you the research about what other people are saying and doing around creativity and how it applies in the business sector, how it applies to innovation, and how we can all tap into that innate creativity that we have in order to be more successful both in our work and in our play. So moving on to the next slide here, I have a quick overview. We're going to be talking about what is creativity, and a term that I coined, conscious creativity. We're going to talk about how important creativity is in business. We're going to discuss how creativity relates to innovation, how it sparks innovation in the business sector, and how can we tap into that innate creative spirit that we all have, and what's a roadmap that we can create for ourselves for unleashing that conscious creativity in the business sector. So I'm going to start out with some of the research that I've conducted about what other people are saying and researching in terms of creativity. I was quite enamored with the conversation from Ken Robinson. Some of you may know of him. He's really a thought leader in the field of creativity in Britain. And back in 1998, he led an advisory committee on creative and cultural education. He's been a very vocal advocate for changing the way that we approach education, certainly in Britain and across the planet. And he defined creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. A very nice, simple definition that I think is something that we can work with. So what is conscious creativity? And just as an aside, let me say that most of the photography in this presentation is my own. So one of the goals that I have is using photography as a tool for communication and being able to kind of have the visual representation of an idea come across within a photographic image. So for me, conscious creativity is creativity with a conscience. And the idea is that every action, every thought that we take spirals back to ourselves. You know, I've done quite a bit of study in meditation and Eastern thought methods, paths of wisdom. It's the concept of karma. So action certainly does spiral back to its source, and we want to be creative, but we also want to do so in a way that is beneficial to ourselves, to our environment. So that's the idea of conscious creativity. Another thought leader in the field of creativity in business is the VP of Product Management for Adobe, John Pereira. And this was a statement that he made about how important creativity is, certainly within education, again, leveraging the vision of Ken Robinson. And his opinion is that creativity within all disciplines is something that's going to drive the global economy and career success for the next generation. Who would imagine the president and CEO of IBM talking about creativity? Now, this is an interesting quote here that doesn't use the term creativity, but it does talk about how we often get locked into certain ways of thinking and the importance of unlearning the standard ways that we approach doing business or any activity in the world today to make the world a better place. And it was interesting to me, coming from a technology leader, that she pointed out that it's really not about technology. It's not about a technology tool. It's about mindset. It's about culture. And unlearning the ways that we think about doing things and taking a fresh approach. So again, to me, this underscores the importance of creative vision, creative thought, creative action. I have a couple studies here that, of course, they are dated, but I do feel that they're still relevant to talk about and reference in terms of how business sees the role of creativity in their success. And here we're talking about major corporations, but this is also very relevant if we're a solopreneur or a small to mid-sized business. The role of creativity in leadership, the role of creativity in employee success is very high. These are studies that were done by IBM, the first one in 2010 on the left, reported in Fast Company. This was a study of 1,500 corporate heads across 60 nations, 33 different industries, and creativity was the top leadership quality identified as important over the next 5 years. Now, of course, this was done in 2010. We've already passed that 5-year mark now, but it's still, I think, relevant. You see that at that point, 60% creativity was seen as 60% of the most important leadership quality. There was a follow-up study done also by IBM in 2012, a global CEO study about employee success. And creativity comes in number 3, 61%. It was interesting to note also the two items, the two qualities that superseded creativity were communicative and collaborative. So again, we're dealing with soft human issues. Again, we're not talking about technology. We're talking about human potential, human capability. So what about the writings? There are many, many, many books on the topic of creativity. These are just a few that I am reading, have read. I'm currently reading Creative Confidence, which is an outstanding book written by brothers Tom Kelly and David Kelly. They are the founders of IDEO. I don't know how many of you know of the company IDEO, spelled in all caps, but it's a global design agency responsible for partnering with many large companies, including folks like Steelcase, in rethinking furniture, rethinking equipment. They were involved in the early design of the Apple mouse with Steve Jobs, the very first mouse that came out. They helped design that device. So another favorite author of mine is Daniel Pink on the right, A Whole New Mind. He's talking in this book about, and very well-researched book, about how right-brainers are going to rule the future. And his thesis really is that the qualities that we think of as being right-brain are going to be more and more critical in success in the world today and in solving the challenges that we face, certainly in business, in politics, in whatever field of endeavor that we have, trying to create a better world. And he took it further to speak really of more of a whole brain approach, combining left brain, right brain, heart, values, and so forth. So again, underscoring that these are important streams of thought in the world today that I think we all can benefit from paying attention to, both in our own lives and in the lives of our colleagues who we're working with.
Chris, I think we have a poll question you were hoping to sneak in here.
Indeed we do, and I've gone past it, so let's step back and hit that.
You want the first one or the second one?
Well, let's see. That was supposed to be right here, I believe.
Yep. All right, we're bringing it up.
Thank you for the reminder, Cindy.
So the poll is open. Feel free to submit your answer.
I think this is an interesting question because a lot of us find that in our jobs, we don't really feel we have the opportunity to tap into our full creative potential. And we think of creativity as being kind of relegated to our hobbies. Maybe we have a hobby of painting or photography in my case, or any other field of endeavor that we think of as more of the arts. The reality, though, is that creativity is an important part of our work as well. Creativity is about creating things, and we're all creators. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes here.
So the results are in. It looks like hobbies is the clear front runner.
Yes, I'm not surprised. So this is something that I think is going to be changing over the years. We see this from the book by Daniel Pink, for example, that creativity, right brain thinking is going to be much more important in business. So hopefully we're all going to have much more opportunity to bring our creative potential into the workplace. So I'm going to jump forward back to where we were here. I think we also have another poll which was scheduled to happen right here. Am I right, Cindy?
That is correct, Chris. So it's being opened right now.
Thank you. So given the smaller percentage of folks who felt like they were able to engage their creative potential in the workplace, we may have fewer responses on this. It'll be interesting to see what the poll reveals. Again, I think we often think of the people who are creative in the workplace are those that are involved perhaps in doing graphic design, web design, things that are more traditionally thought of as a creative endeavor. I have found in my sales career, and especially partnering with technical salespeople, people who are more on the consulting role but partner in the relationship and closing deals, that being able to be creative about matching customers' needs and goals with the services that our firm offers is really critical. And my favorite people to partner with over the 20-year history I've had with human factors have been those who took a more creative approach to matching up what the customer is trying to achieve with standard kinds of services that we might offer. So it's interesting seeing that in sales, we're really getting 0% in the response. Certainly marketing is an area. I'm not surprised to see that marketing does require a high level of creativity, so that's great to see there. So Cindy, is that the full response on the poll?
Yep. Yes,
okay.
It is.
So moving on, there's another thought leader, Daniel Burrus, a futurist and best-selling author, who spoke about the relationship between creativity and innovation. And interestingly, I gave this same presentation to a meetup group that I run locally in Asheville last night, and I got some interesting pushback on Daniel's definition about creativity. Many people felt that his definition of creativity as knowledge, a function of knowledge, curiosity, imagination, and evaluation, were a little bit too left brain, that creativity, was something that's a little bit more soulful, perhaps, a little bit more about kind of our right brain way of thinking. So that was interesting to me. I think in some ways that is relevant, but certainly these qualities of our experience or our knowledge, our level of curiosity, our level of imagination, and evaluation of things, how we evaluate what's happening, what we're doing, certainly play a role in creativity. The shift from creativity to innovation, I think Daniel is right on with that definition. It really relates to the application of an idea, and that innovation is, in many cases, a collaborative enterprise. So this is when we get into the more collective use of creativity within a business sector. Even if it's a small business, even if it's an entrepreneur business, we're certainly going to be collaborating and partnering with colleagues or certainly with our customers to come up with creative solutions and ideas. And then how could we leave Steve Jobs out of the picture, right? The innovation secrets of Steve Jobs. This brings in the idea of being willing to make mistakes and leveraging those mistakes to move on and go forward. So I think this was a wonderful idea for us to move forward. And I think we have another poll question here also, Cindy. Am I right?
We do have one. Yes, Chris. Everyone should be seeing the poll about missed opportunities.
I think this is something that we hear a lot about in the business sector, that people don't really have the opportunity to tap into their creative capabilities as much as they would like to. The freedom, the empowerment, the delegation of creative ideas.
Poll is ended. The results are on the screen.
Okay, there we go. So it looks like pretty much everybody who answered is indicating that they do feel there have been missed opportunities. So these are the things that we want to try to shift in the world today, I believe. That's kind of a mission. So what are some of the things that stop our creativity? So there's a book out there written by husband and wife team, Andrew and Gaia Grant, Who Killed Creativity. I have not read the book, I'll confess, but it was interesting to me, the 7 key things that they feel are killing creativity within the workplace or for us individually. When I first explored those ideas, I thought of their message being that, you know, these are things outside of ourselves. If we're in a work environment, we have a crew of people who are trying to control what's happening. We have a family of people that are fearful of change. We have the pressures of deadlines and so forth. So all 7 of these, I was thinking of them as external factors. And I posed the question, what's missing from this picture? Well, it was interesting in my presentation last evening, the comment came, you know, those are also internal factors. We have those same dynamics happening within our own belief patterns, within our own way of thinking. We have our own internal control crew, our own internal apathy clan. So it is both an inside and an outside phenomenon of creativity and how we can avoid stifling it. So I want to talk a little bit now about some of the guiding principles that have become important to me in creativity and looking at it from the inside out. These are my personal guiding principles. I really feel that consciousness, human consciousness, is inherently creative. We are all creatives. And all too often we hear people saying or believing that, you know, I'm really not that creative. Somebody else is the creative and, you know, it's just not me. I think that's a belief pattern or perhaps something we've been educated into that's not really accurate. I think the reality is that we're all creating through every thought, action, and vision that we may have. And really the authentic discovery and expression of our creative activity comes from within ourselves, within kind of the deeper self of who we really are as a human consciousness. I also believe that creativity is not a destination, it's a journey, just like life. It's something that we're always growing, we're always developing, we always have an opportunity to play more and to build our creative power more fully. And it's something that must be exercised in order to grow, in order to stay fit. And the biggest obstacle we're going to encounter, again, I think, are our own fears and limiting beliefs. Even though there are those factors that appear to be outside of ourselves, the most serious ones are the ones that we harbor within our own thinking and our own behavior, our own beliefs. So I want to talk a little bit about the journey that I have embarked on to expand on my creativity. And it's a journey that I will share with people, that I'm sharing with people to work with them and help them navigate this journey. and now we're getting back to some more of my own photography work. So in a creative journey, when I find that I get stuck, it's because I've kind of lost touch with that soul of my creative spirit. What is the passion that really is inspiring me to do something? And how can I maintain that connection? So this is an area of endeavor, of thought, that I think is very important for us to really spend some time on. Find the soul of your creative spirit. What is that? What is it that you're passionate about? And then that passion needs to connect with a sense of purpose. Where is it going? Why does it really matter? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to other people? This applies in the business sector. If a company is coming up with a new idea, a new product, a new service, where is the passion for that? And why is it important? Why does it really matter? And then we need to fashion some projects. We need to get focused around that direction. We need to stay committed to that. These are the projects. You're going to find that I'm leveraging the P words here. So I have 6 Ps in this journey, something to make it easy to remember. We need to connect with our passion. We need to connect that to a sense of purpose. And projects will help us to substantiate that, to make that real. And after we've done a certain number of projects, we start to build a portfolio. We begin to find a style if we're an artist. If it's a business, we begin to build a suite of products. We're creating a body of work that constitutes a portfolio, something that we can showcase both for ourselves and both for our market. And speaking of market, that's the people. Who is our audience? Who are the people that we want to share with? It pays to put some attention into, who is going to resonate with the creative activity that we're engaged in, or the business service or the business product that we have. And ultimately, that leads us to creating a place of prosperity where we have engagement with our people, with our audience, through having created a solid platform with all the other Ps. We have engagement, we have conversion, and we are able to sustain doing what we love doing. So I'm going to break this down now a little bit further and go into each one of these areas a little bit more deeply. So when we talk about passion, I think of it as a soul connection. And some of the things that play here that would be part of the endeavor, part of the thought process that we go through in order to really connect with that passion that we have. Think about it as an inside job. It's really something that you can use tools like personal or guided meditation to tap into what's really important to you, to tap into an appreciation for who you are, for what your skills are. Again, self-inquiry, but in an appreciative way. This is not the time to be critical, self-critical. This is the time to acknowledge what your strengths are. And to remember that it's not about what other people think. I mean, certainly at some point you're going to perhaps check with a spouse or check with a colleague. How do you feel about what I'm thinking? But really, you don't want to be overthrown by what other people think. It's really what's important to you. It's really what lights your fire. It's what makes you happy. Sustaining that connection can be done with a muse. Find a muse, find a meme, something that kind of reminds you on a daily basis or whenever you feel like you're kind of losing that soul connection. How can you tap into that muse that enlivens the fire, the passion? And I mentioned here creating a personal creativity meme. So for me, the meme of my coaching practice as a creativity coach is unleashing your creativity at work and play. So that becomes a meme or a tagline. That's what I mean by a meme. It's something that expresses kind of the soul of your business. Most businesses do have a tagline that encapsulate what it is that conveys who they are and what they're trying to offer to the world. And we also, at this stage, need to identify a strategy for transcending the blocks. When those creativity killers come into the picture, what do we do about it? What's our strategy? How do we get back to the passion? How do we reignite the fire? If you're a writer, there's an awful lot about writer's block and how people can overcome writer's block. These are things that everybody who's engaged in any kind of creative endeavor do need to spend time on. So going more deeply into purpose, why does it matter? So I think of purpose as the engine powered by the fuel of passion. The two are very closely related. One without the other isn't going anywhere. So purpose is that engine, it's the pistons that drive us forward, but it has to have that fuel of passion. Purpose gives meaning, it gives direction to our actions. Purpose is really of our own creation. We can build purpose into whatever we're envisioning, whatever our action is. But it does exist within the context of our life personally and the culture of the community that needs to relate to the community. Purpose just for ourselves is somewhat limited. It also becomes the foundation of a value proposition if we're talking about a business endeavor. And another way of thinking of purpose is it's action with intent to improve the world. We talked about projects earlier. So how do projects help us move forward with building creativity in our activity, either at work or at play? It's something that helps us engage, it helps us stay on track, it instantiates, it sustains our creative activities, our creative endeavor. So it's important here, I've found, to define a clear and focused path and a destination, much like a road trip. Now I'm going to kind of caution that. I've talked about focused path and a destination. It's really not always necessary to have a clear destination. I think a lot of creative activity happens when we have some general sense of where we want to go, something that we feel passionate about exploring, about experimenting with. We may not be totally clear of what the destination is, but there is some sense of a journey, of some place that we want to get to. Oftentimes people talk about Thomas Edison and the number of failures that he had in inventing the incandescent light bulb and many of his hundreds or thousands of other inventions. It's important to fail. It's important to fail early and fail often. Allow yourself to fail, allow yourself to experiment, and maybe even the term failure needs to be changed, or at least we need to change the way we think of the term failure. It really isn't failure, it's experimentation and learning through experimentation. So anybody who studied the way in which Thomas Edison approached his work, he's documenting, he's learning from his experiments and how to change things in order to get to the intended goal. Another very valuable tip from the book on creative confidence from the Kelly brothers was taking small steps to mastery. So if we break down the journey into manageable steps that we're sure we can master, then we can step back and say, okay, I've had a success. I've achieved something today. I'm moving forward. So I think that's an important thing that really helps us to stay on track with projects. If we continually see the project as huge, as massive, then that can become a block in and of itself. This was a fun quote also from the book on creative confidence from two collaborators with IDEO, Bob Sutton, who's a Stanford University professor, and Diego Rodriguez. Failure sucks, but instructs. So projects then evolve into a body of work. And this is where we have a collection of work around a particular theme. The projects we may embark on begin to collect themselves around something that kind of represents, if it's a business, a coherent body of services, a coherent suite of products. And it provides evidence of our capabilities, both for ourselves and for our audience. In the business sector, this becomes a key feature of a website or our set of brochures, our set of services. It becomes case studies that tell the story of successes that we've had working with other clients. Another interesting concept from the Kelly brothers was the idea of an anti-portfolio. And there's a missing closed quote there. That should be anti-portfolio and closed quotes. But what they felt was it shows authenticity and ability to learn from mistakes. And the example that they referenced was a very large investment firm, Bessemer Venture Partners, and its founder, David Cohen, openly lists in his website his misses for investment. He missed the opportunity, even though he was aware of them, to invest in 3 major companies that we all know have gone very big. In the case of Google, it was very interesting. He lived down the street from the 2 founders of Google. A neighbor tried numerous times to introduce him to these 2 young gentlemen who were developing a search engine in their garage. And David said he was too busy to mess with small things like that. So it was interesting that the Kelly brothers felt that that was a real kudos to David Cohen, that he openly listed these misses in his website. So this brings us now to the stage of our audience. Who are our people? And how do we find that perfect audience? And what do we do with them? Well, this is kind of a fun photograph from Times Square. Those of you who've been there know that there's this huge stadium overlooking Times Square. And early in the morning, the maintenance staff is out there cleaning the bleachers. In the evening, it's just totally packed with people shooting selfies with their smartphones of, here I am in Times Square. But it's an audience, so this was my attempt to convey the idea of finding your audience and populating it. So if your art is for pleasure and personal self-expression, maybe that audience is just you and a close circle of family and friends. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But if you want a following, if you want to turn this into a business, into sales, then you need to think about, you need to define and understand who is your audience. And how will you reach that audience? And how do you want to meet them? Are you going to be meeting them in person? Is it going to be virtual meetings, as we're meeting here today in WebEx? But if you are meeting them, you always would want to do so with authenticity, with integrity, perhaps even vulnerability. And that kind of gets back to the point about being able to share an anti-portfolio. And this also helps you build the value, short-term and long-term, that you're delivering to your audience. And I believe we have another poll at this point before we go on. Cindy, am I right?
Yep. Opening it now. There it is. Are you contemplating a career or work change that would benefit from unleashing your creative potential more fully?
Having attended other of the RIT webinars, I know that we often have a fairly broad demographic of people participating. Some are at a stage of looking into a second career. Some are more recent graduates and they're, fully immersed in their first career. So that was kind of my goal here with this particular poll question, to see what kind of demographic we have on the call today. There we go, very interesting. So there is a higher percentage, about almost half, at 45% of the people who are thinking about or already embarking on a second career. This is very common in today's economic climate, wouldn't you agree?
I would.
Okay, so moving on, once we've kind of gone through these steps, I think we want to arrive at a place of being able to sustain and nurture the activity, the endeavor, the creative activity that we're passionate about, whether it's in a business we're engaged in working for someone else or whether it's in our own. So what are the elements there that we need to think about? I think here we need to be having a consistent and regular connection with the audience. This bears true for anyone who's simply a creative artist or somebody who's engaged in a business with products and services, providing content that's valuable to that audience. We need to have a clear path for engaging and converting that audience to become paying customers. So we're talking about entrepreneurship here a little bit, and taking the creative power that we have to create something into a successful business. I was recently listening to another online webinar where entrepreneurs were being interviewed. It was actually a podcast, and one of the entrepreneurs was asked, well, what is the most important thing to you in your activity as an entrepreneur? What do you enjoy the most? And the answer was the opportunity to create new things. So again, it comes back to our role as creative beings and how we can enjoy leveraging that capability. So we need to continuously improve on how we add value to people. Again, applying our creative capability and genius. Sharing tips, inspiration, new ideas, techniques, recommended readings. There's another favorite saying I have that somebody posted on Facebook, an entrepreneur. He said, content is free, application is billable. So one of the newer ways in the internet world that we are marketing ourselves, even larger corporations, and building a following, building a reputation, is through the content that they deliver for free. The popularity of blog sites, the popularity of e-newsletters, and so forth. It's very important that we share content, and it more and more has become something that is available, knowledge is available and shared freely. But when it comes to applying that content, that's where we have something that we can charge people for and people are willing to pay for. And another part of building the prosperity phase of your creative endeavor is the pricing and the special offers that you put out there. So this brings us to a quick overview of my endeavor here as a creativity coach and what I'm doing to help people to tap into their own creativity, both at work and at play. This is a quick description of what I do. I help individuals, teams, and corporate executives to tap into their creative potential. The goal is greater fulfillment, greater success. So I'm taking an approach that is whole brain, whole heart perspective. I want to connect with what people's inner passion is, the purpose of their creative vision, and take that into thought and action that is effective. So together we would be creating a roadmap. This is going to extend that perspective and the foundation that we've created from the passion, the purpose, into a clear roadmap and an actionable journey. Photography is going to be an important part of this. I think that there's a whole field, of course, of art therapy and how art, photography, creative expression, visual expression can be used to get ourselves outside the box of habitual thinking and belief patterns and spark new ways of seeing, experiencing, and creating. So that's going to be an important part of the work that I do. Everyone has a smartphone pretty much these days, or they have a small point-and-shoot camera. Getting out there and shooting at work or out in the field in a way that tells a story of what it is that you want to create, the way that you may want to change the perspective, change the culture, change the dynamic for the way that you're working with folks in your business or in your personal life. And I've put together a 90-day journey. I'm calling it the 90-day creativity upgrade. So what does that look like? So again, it's a journey that steps through these 6 Ps: passion, purpose, projects, portfolio, people, and prosperity. And what do we do? How do we work together? We're going to start out with a 90-minute discovery consultation. It's going to be followed in 1 week by a personalized roadmap for your own 90-day creativity upgrade. We're going to be drafting that together in the 90-minute discovery consultation, and a week later I'll be putting that back to you in a written format. And then throughout the 6 phases of the 90-day creativity upgrade, there will be a 60-minute progress consultation at each stage. We're going to be talking about what's working, what's not working, detailed feedback on what you've produced visually as well as written, and we're going to have some guidance on next steps. And throughout the entire journey, there's opportunity at any point in time for email conversation, Q&A for the entire 9-day creativity upgrade. But as with every presentation pitch, that's not all you get. This 90-day upgrade will also have a community, probably Google+, but perhaps Facebook instead. It will depend, I think, on where people have the largest presence, but a member-only group for team sharing and collaboration. In some of the endeavors I've been involved with, there's a online photography community that I'm a member of called the Arcanum, and it weighs very heavily on this idea of team sharing and collaboration and learning not only from the mentor or the teacher, but also from one another. And everybody has an opportunity to step into a role of mentorship, of sharing what's working for them, sharing their creative capabilities. So that'll be a very important part of the 90-day creativity upgrade. And we'll also have a monthly group hangout that I'll be leading and also bringing in guests on creativity empowerment topics, perhaps even folks from within the group who will share their own experience, their own journey and some of the tips that they're learning. And in the future, I'm planning on a series of podcast interviews with creativity thought leaders. So if this looks interesting, sounds interesting to any of you, I would welcome reaching out to me. I'm offering to any of the RIT alumni who've been on the call a free 30-minute consultation. We can do it by phone, Skype, or Google Hangout. I would ask that you go ahead and reach out to me by email today, and we schedule your session no later than the end of February. So I do hope to hear from those of you, and would welcome any kind of feedback in any way, whether you would like to pursue a consultation or just a conversation. No obligation whatsoever. So I believe that brings us to the culmination of my presentation, Cindy, and I think at this point I'm happy to take other questions, any questions that may have come in through the chat window, and I'll let you help orchestrate that part of our conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, we have had some questions come in. One from Jeff: have you found much resistance when introducing a creativity solution or approach in your workplace? And if so, do you think it was the approach you took or the fact that it was an introduction of change in the workplace that caused the resistance?
Wow, that's a great question. So the company I've been with for over 20 years now, I do have the good fortune of having a good track record of success in bringing in sales. I report directly to the president of the company. It's a 200-employee company, so not huge. So my input is generally paid attention to. That said, I have run into resistance. There are often times when I've felt we needed to take a particular business direction that I didn't get receptivity to it. And it may be that sometimes it was the way in which I presented it. Perhaps I didn't have enough evidence, enough research to back up my claim or my suggestion. I think the two go, both happen. There's also a resistance to change. I guess without revealing too much about my company, there was one particular suggestion I had about shifting our model to be more toward a managed services consulting model. And this may be getting into an area that people may not be familiar with, but any kind of IT, information technology, or agency-type consulting firm can follow a number of models for their service delivery. We just do projects, and when the project's done, we're done. Or you can follow a model of we place contractors in your location for an indefinite period of time. They live locally and they work in your office and they're essentially reporting to you. Or you can have a model which is called managed services, where you come in and you actually bring in an entire team of people, you manage that team, and you essentially work as an entire managed service. This is the direction that I encouraged our CEO and our president to take over a year and a half ago, which did not meet with receptivity. The interesting thing is, in just the past 3 months, they have taken up that direction as a major new strategy for our company. So sometimes it takes time for a creative idea or direction to be recognized, and you need to just kind of sit back, make your case, and let go of it.
Thank you, Chris. Probably just one more question we have time for. This one's from Amanda. You mentioned creativity killers and that creativity is an inside job. That being said, are we our own worst enemies when it comes to creativity?
Well, yes, I think that was the point I was seeking to make when I said in one of my earlier slides that the biggest obstacle we'll all face is our own beliefs. Our own beliefs and patterns, behavior, thought patterns. You know, so we kind of have to get out of our own way. And that's where I think it's so important for us to have maybe a practice of self-reflection, a practice of, you know, get out and take a walk in the woods. Get away from what is the block and kind of get out of your own way. I think we are often our own worst enemy in really tapping into our creative capability. And sometimes we need help for that. You know, it's any kind of sports, any kind of business activity, corporate executives, most senior corporate executives these days have a coach. They have a mentor. And executive coaching is a huge business. And so it does help to have someone to kind of help you get out of your own way, to provide a mirror to see what's going on for you and provide feedback.
Great, thank you. Well, that is all the time we have for Q&A. We are literally practically out of time. Any additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #RITwebinars. Oops, sorry, I'm having a technical issue. Please remember that all participants will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar recording. And we thank you, Chris, for being our speaker today, and thank you to all of you out there listening in and joining us for today's webinar. Our next webinar is scheduled for later this month on January 28th. We will present Rising Above the Storms with our presenter, Alphonsine Imanaragua. Not sure I said that right. She's an alumna from the class of 2008. Alphonsine is a network engineer with Cisco Systems, also in North Carolina, which I believe is where Chris is coming to us from. She is a motivational speaker through her nonprofit Rising Above the Storms, with a goal to encourage all of us with a message of hope, forgiveness, and love, and empowerment through education for youth at risk and advocates for orphans worldwide.